Okay, good morning. I think we're live now. So we'll give it a couple of minutes for people to join us for today's live stream. We should have chosen something nice to point the camera at. Not that we're not nice, but you know, something naturey.
Yeah, well, yeah.
So yeah, just give it a few seconds for Hazel to be able to share the video in a few different places for people to actually join it. The masses.
The mystery's all gone now. People know what they're watching when it comes up. But
That is
in
true,
the good old
isn't it?
days, it was, oh, what's today going to be?
Surprise, close to nature. God, what's going on now?
My watch is 5 back, but it's back.
Your watch is
not helpful.
I reckon let's do the introduction.
Yeah.
And let's get rolling. So, good morning, everybody. I'm Freya.
And I'm Alex.
And we're from the Green Gym team of TCV Leeds. And we are at Hollybush Conservation Centre today, which is our site in Kirkstall. And we're planning on talking about how to build a wildlife pond, a mini wildlife pond.
Not just any wildlife pond.
A really little one. So yeah, I guess to start off with, we'll talk about why you would want to build a wildlife pond at all, but then also why you might want to build a mini one. So yeah, what's important about wildlife ponds?
Well, I mean, if you want to check out a super intense, in-depth version of this stream about ponds in general, they will be linked. We did some earlier on last year, but the main reason that you'd want one is
they're on the Skelton Grange Facebook. So there's a playlist on the Skelton Grange Facebook page, which is our sister site down in South Leeds, down in Sturton. And on their Facebook page last year, we did a couple of live streams actually on ponds. So if you want to watch extended videos of me and Alex doing soliloquies about our love of newts, then that's the place to go. And it's also, those were filmed in summer and spring, so there was much more things awake because it's still winter now, so you can see more of the animals. So we won't get to see many of the animals you find in a pond now because it's winter, but those videos will show you what you might find and what you can find if you do this.
So the main reason that you'd want to build a wildlife pond is it attracts more nature than anything else. If you have, if you thought, I want to have a bunch of crawlies, bunch of critters, or even birds or hedgehogs or other things in your garden, or amphibians, if you wanted something in your garden, the best thing you can do is build a nature pond. And whether you've got a 10-acre site as your back garden, or if you've just got 10 square foot patch with cobbles or
even a balcony, because like a balcony, you're not going to get frogs and things moving in because you're high up.
They can't fly.
They can't. Frogs cannot fly. You heard it here first.
They can jump pretty high, but
But you won't get things like that moving in, and you don't want to introduce them because they won't have anywhere to go. But what you will still get things that can fly and little microorganisms that will still be beneficial, even on a balcony 10 stories up. You might get less stuff, but yeah, and it's just for the surface area, the sort of area of what you're doing, you just get so much more because they are ecosystems that are they're evolved to be isolated. Because land, things can move around more, but ponds, they are isolated habitats because a pond is a pond. It's a fairly static thing. It forms over here. Everything has to exist in that space in naturally forming ponds.
When creatures mature, or when they get to an age where they can fletch, they can go, miles and miles and miles. But as they're growing, there are creatures that are dormant, they stay in the pond. So
how long? Naturally forming ponds have been around forever. As long as there's been wetlands, they've probably been around. That's probably sort of how life evolved, was things sort of forming little landlocked ponds and then gradually becoming more and more dried out. And then, since the dawn of terrestrial life, there's been ponds.
Since rain was a thing.
Yes, since rain.
Ditches tend to fill with water.
Yeah.
With agriculture comes more ditches.
Yeah, so as soon as humans' interaction with ponds, as soon as when we were what's the word? Migratory,
hunter-gatherer type.
Humans would have used ponds, but then as agriculture developed, there's always been ponds in how agriculture used to work. They've just been a constant feature of humans' interactions because that's a way of watering your crops. It like oases in the desert is quite a well-known one, isn't it? Where like that's where you get the agriculture in a desert. But the same goes in England, like for cattle to feed, for you to water your crops. Before there was piped water, you needed ponds and you needed ditches to be able to maintain your farmland. However, in recent years, farming has become much more industrialized. It's become much more widespread. You don't get little farmsteads with little ponds that kind of do it like that. You get piped water, so it just goes pipes and then it goes to a standing tap. So a lot of ponds.
It's the past sort of century, so like early 1900s, we were still doing mass agriculture in the UK, but now we get most of our stuff shipped over, so there's no need for it. And what is it? It's like 70% of the UK, or British, sorry, it's the island of Britain. 70% of them are just gone.
So yeah, 70% of ponds have been lost in the last century.
Yeah.
Which is a lot, given, and what we're talking about is they are quite isolated populations and they can travel, like frogs and things do travel, but they do need to travel to something. They're not going to travel 70 miles to the next pond. So you do need a mosaic of habitats that they can move between, and a lot of that mosaic of habitats has been lost. So the corridors between those habitats. So you can get isolated habitats, but if things haven't got a pathway to move, then they're not going to be able to continue and the populations aren't going to be able to grow. So it's really important that, especially in urban areas and things, we are looking at building these little mini ponds so we can provide somewhere for hopefully spawning frogs and things, but also, for things to stop off en route, for dragonflies to be able to produce a nymph that can then move, and they'll be able to spread, and they'll be able to survive. They won't end up in these isolated populations that are much, much more vulnerable to going extinct. And amphibians, so that's the toads, the frogs, the newts. You might have heard of the great crested newt, which is protected, but all amphibians globally are really at risk at the moment. There's a lot of problems with a lot of disease and a lot of fungus, but also a lot of habitat loss means that a lot of populations are vulnerable.
There are a lot more car parks nowadays where there was wetland or housing developments.
They just really like building council houses on floodplains, don't they? Really like it.
And I wonder why it floods. Anyway, that's another issue for another time.
But so all of those wetlands would have been just a mosaic of ponds and things. Have either been drained so that they're all one solid watercourse, or built on tarmac. So we're going to look at how we're going to build a mini pond. So that's why you might build a pond. You might build a mini pond because a lot of us don't have space for a big pond.
Yeah.
You might have a garden. So we've kind of chosen this location where we are at the moment at the back of Hollytunnel. So a few of you who know Hollybush, we've recently had this area paved, so that's so we can run our groups. A potting area, so we've not paved all of Hollybush, but we've paved this little area. But this is quite a good representation of what a lot of people have in their gardens. Like a lot of front gardens, you might want to park your car on it. Like a lot of people do change their front gardens to paving like this. This is not good habitat. This is distinctly bad habitat. So we do have lots of good habitat just over there. Everywhere else, just to be clear. But if you've got this in your garden, how you want it to be low maintenance, you want it to be usable for other things, but you want to help wildlife, a mini pond might be what you want. Or you've got kids and you don't want your kids falling in a pond. That's another thing. Yeah. And there's lots of reasons you might want it to be mini. So another reason is you might want a big pond for keeping fish in, but then you might want a little pond because if you keep fish in your pond, it's not a wildlife pond anymore. If you have
watched any of our pond live streams, I think every single one we go on a rant about how you shouldn't have fish in a wildlife pond.
Not that we don't like fish. We like fish.
One, it's not a true wildlife pond if you've got something you've bought and put in. Yeah. And two, they will just eat everything. They're a bit of a menace.
So if you do have a big pond, you want your koi pond, you want them, that's fair enough. You want something that is your garden. But if you want to encourage wildlife as well, you could then put a wildlife pond sort of on the edge of the big pond, and that offers refuge for the wildlife to get into. You could even make a little channel that the fish couldn't get along, so there's an escape route that they can get to. So it could just be a little annex, like a granny annex, but like a frog annex to your big pond. So, and you can make Yeah, a mini wildlife
I mean,
pond.
the first question is, what should I make my mini wildlife pond out of? What have you got there?
This thing I've been gesticulating with. So yeah, anything that's waterproof, basically. So a mini could be up to the size of the area you have that you think you want to put a pond in. So one of the most accessible, a lot of people have, or a lot of people can get easily and cheaply, is a washing up bowl. They are waterproof. That's what they're for. They are a solid construction. We've actually got one. It's a little bit grotty. We've been using this to clean boots in at Hollybush. So if you've got sort of an old one that needs replacing, it's a bit grubby, and you can reuse that, that would be the ideal, because we don't want to encourage getting more and more plastic every time you want to make a wildlife pond. So if you do have like an old one, it's got a bit warped, it's a bit squashed. We're not going to want to wash dishes on this. So yeah, that's perfect for wildlife pond. But you could use anything, old storage boxes. You could, even if you don't want it to be square, you could get an old compost bag and cut that. And if it's not got any holes in, you could use that as sort of a mini pond liner. Then you move up to pond liners, and you get those sort of pre-shaped ponds, don't you? The ones that are like a mold. Yeah. If you do get one of them, they are pretty tricky to get your hole exactly the right size of the shape.
And I found they can be quite fragile sometimes.
Yeah, because so can other things, but because you've got to get it sort of exactly the right shape, the hole exactly the right shape for them, especially when you fill it with water and pressure pushes out. Those moulded ponds are great, but they are quite a lot of work to get right.
We've not spent any money on any of the stuff we're doing today. We've not spent
a penny. Things!
So if it's something that you're looking to do that's cost effective and fun for everyone that's involved, whether you're 90 or 9, it's fun to do. Yeah.
So we've got the washing up bowl. We've also then selected our location. So you'll see we've actually put another. We've done a Blue Peter style. Here's one we made earlier.
See later. The anticipation.
Oh, but we've selected a location. So the location, it has to be fairly flat. It also has to be somewhere that's kind of out of the way. So for a few reasons, once you've selected your location, you want that location to be where you leave it, because a pond takes a while to establish. The longer you leave it, the more you'll get, the more diversity you get. So you don't want to put it somewhere where you're moving it all the time, because that will reduce the quality of the habitat you're creating. Also, you don't want to step in it. You don't want it right next to your main footpath. So every time you're coming home in the evening and it's dark and you're sort of chatting to your housemate or something, and you just put your foot in the pond, you might fall out with your pond. You might fall out of love with your wildlife pond then. So you want it to be out of the way so it's undisturbed, and so it doesn't disturb you.
Yeah.
Like I'd say. So let's pretend that's what we've done. We are just making one that's temporary for the purpose of this video. So we grab the camera, we demonstrate where it's going. So I've already dug this out a little bit. So I flattened this. So you just want to dig it out and flatten the sort of base of where you're going. And then plonk that there. You want to get it fairly level. If you've got access to a spirit level, then that can if you've got access to a spirit level, then that can be useful. But if you do it by eye, might be worth putting some water in, and if the water's level, this is level. If you don't have a spirit level, because a lot of people don't. And it's probably not worth buying one just for a mini pond, is it? But yeah, for the time being, we won't fill it up with water. So if you do put water in it, be prepared to take it out again, level it, and then. But yeah, so that's pretty solid. You want to be careful at this stage that you're not sort of ramming it down. There's not any sharp stones. So do a little bit of check there's no sharp stone. Because what you don't want to do is plonk it here and then immediately put a hole in the bottom with a sharp stone. And you also don't want to. When it fills with water, water weighs quite a lot. So once it fills with water, it may then push down more and make a hole, which it didn't do in the sort of locating process. So do just clear underneath of any debris, any stones, any old nails that might be in there that might make a hole in the pond, or especially if you're using something like a compost bag that is quite fragile. So yeah, we've located that. But we have, this would hold water now, so this would be a pond. But it's got a few issues, like how will things get in? How will things get out? Where will things go when they're in it? Would you want to live in this? Always think about what you want out of your house. You want
A front door.
a front door, a roof. Yeah, a way in. Like, you don't want to just, if you lived on you wouldn't want a front wall and then your front door up there, would you? You want steps. So, yeah, we'll start with phase 2, which is some rocks. So we've got a variety of sizes. We've got little ones, some big ones, and yeah, all in between. And these are sort of some York stone that we had from digging. If you dig a lot in your garden, if you have just had your paving done, try and save some of the stones that come out of the ground, because usually there will be stones that come out of the ground. And those are good for putting inside and outside the pond. So it should be. Yeah, I'll grab a few rocks.
Yeah, just flipping the camera.
So we want to do a combination of sort of piling them up around the outside, and what that does is it sort of beds your wildlife pond in place. It'll make it more stable. It'll mean it's not going to blow away, but also it provides a ramp that animals can climb up to get to the pond. So that's another thing. Like, there's the habitat of the pond, but it's also great for sort of birds and things to come and have a drink, for hedgehogs to come and have a drink. But oh no, they've had a drink and they've fallen in. Hedgehogs may be able to swim, but they can't swim for very long, and they also can't climb. There's no pointing at that at all. You can admire that grubby.
Yeah, I mean, it's a good example though. It's one that we're not going to use it for cleaning anymore.
No.
Give it another purpose.
So something that's really important to do is to make sure that there is a way out of the pond. And actually, we were saying before, make sure there's 2, because then if your first one fails, so if someone's come home in the evening, they've accidentally put their foot in, they've kicked that one and it's fallen over, there's still another one. So there's sort of a second possibility. I'd even put a small stone underneath it just to sort of, right, well, that's probably made it less secure, but try and find ways of sort of infilling it and making it as secure as possible. And another one there, we were saying, try and use stones for this, because people do use sort of bits of wood. You can use planks and things, but wood rots. So if you're doing that, you need to be making sure it's also lighter, so it's much more likely to slip. It's much more likely to move. So if you do use wood, be prepared that you'll have to do a lot more paying attention and a lot more maintenance, because the last thing you want in your wildlife pond is to start drowning the wildlife. So yeah, and the other thing is it makes refuge in the bottom. So putting some rocks round the edge, and that means that wildlife eats wildlife. That's what happens. So if you've got frogs and things coming in, and you've also got the little insects and crustaceans and things that are moving in, they want somewhere to hide from the frogs. So you want, and the tadpoles, big tadpoles eat littler tadpoles. You want the littler things to have spaces to hide. So filling it up with, so it's kind of got edge areas that are refuge for the critters to hide from each other, and also to hibernate, get some shelter, to sleep. But you also want to make sure that you are leaving some deep bits. So these are very shallow ponds. Really, you'd want a pond, in an ideal world, you're aiming for at least 60 centimetres deep, but it's still better to have something than nothing. So yeah, just sort of piling up around the edges. Refuge, we've got a couple of escape routes. What else do we need? We want to bed it in a little bit more, don't we?
Yeah, I mean, right now there's still edges that are inaccessible, and it's still got a bit of wiggle.
It also still looks like a washing up bowl.
Yeah, it does.
So putting the rocks around the edge. Choose nice things. Like, you could do a base layer to build it up out of sort of rubble and bits of old hardcore, but the stuff on top, you're going to have to look at this. You want your wildlife pond to look nice, so the stuff for piling on top, you can, and the nicest stones you can find, I would say. But another thing that's good to do is put sort of wooden things around the edge. They do rot over time, so like we were saying, don't have them as your main access points, because if you have them as your main access points, they may fail and the access may be lost as they rot and decay, whereas stones are much more likely to last. So yeah, we've got access out of the pond.
Susan has said, would it ideally be 60 centimeters? Yes, it would. I mean, you want it as sloping. If it's that deep, you want to make sure that it definitely 100% has a shallow area too. But yeah, 20 to 60 centimeters is the ideal.
Yeah.
But this will also have life in it.
It's if you've got it this shallow, it's not going to be 60 centimeters if you want a place for sort of the frogs and things to be hibernating at the bottom, for a layer of sediment to build up that things can bury into. Because if you had a layer of sediment in this, it would take up most of the depth. So this is definitely a small sort of transitionary habitat. It wouldn't make a hugely complex ecosystem.
This would attract more of the mini beasts rather than the macro beasts,
and
I guess.
You might get the frogs sort of spawning it if you're lucky, but yeah, you probably wouldn't get them hibernating over winter. So yeah, do aim for it to be as big as you feel like you can facilitate, but it's better to do something than nothing. Another thing that with it being shallow in winter, the more like this winter, we've had quite a cold winter. That was a demonstration of why to make sure it's secure. It was quite a deep winter, so if this froze, it would take up like as much of this winter. Most of this would be frozen, so anything living in it would then not really have anywhere to go. So the deeper it is, the more it can be resilient to winter problems. But in spring, this will still offer good spring and summer habitat. It also will get hotter as well as getting colder. The bigger the body of the water, the less the temperature fluctuates, which means that it is just a more stable ecosystem and it is a nicer habitat for things to live in. But it's still better to do this than nothing. So yeah, we've got our roots in, so things can come stand here. You've got your little bird having a little drink. It can stand on this rock and have a little bit of a bath. We've got a hedgehog's fallen in. It can climb back out of this ramp. We've got little stones for things to hide in underneath. What else do we need? We've got wood to make habitat for more mini beasts. So that's it. That's habitat outside the pond as well. Yeah,
so there's a lot of, I mean, we've also got a lot of mini beast live stream videos, and yeah, rotting wood like this on the edge provides food and shelter for thousands of other little critters too.
Yeah. So we've then sort of added, we should have waited to add the water to this one. Here's one we made earlier. I reckon we can add the water to this one.
Yeah,
now.
Well, that was what I was going to say. I was holding off, but when you said what else does it need, I was thinking, well, it's not exactly a pond right now.
So with ponds, you don't want to be filling them with tap water. You want to be because tap water has lots of chemicals in. Most tap water in the UK is going to be chlorinated and other chemicals to protect us from microorganisms. But unfortunately, that means for the microorganisms that we want to encourage in a pond, it's not good for them. So
you cannot have pond without the microorganisms. They're the backbone of the pond. Yeah. They're the bottom of the food chain.
Yeah, exactly that. So one thing you can, if you've got a water butt at home, that's perfect. Just get water from the water butt and fill it up straight away. If you don't have a water butt, another good thing is you can leave it like this, and you leave it like this over winter, it will fill up quite quickly. Build this in October. Come January, when the frogs are starting to think about spawning, this will be full of water. So you can just build it and wait for the water to refill. Don't fill it with the water from the tap. Also, don't fill it with water from other ponds. Like, I've heard people saying that. It's like, oh, I don't want to use tap water, so I'll get pond water. That'll be great. You don't want to build it with, like, if you bring water from other ponds, then ponds are isolated ecosystems, like we talked about earlier. That's why they are so diverse in such a small space. They're very evolved to be in that small space. But they're not evolved to have very good defences of things travelling from pond to pond. And it's a huge problem at the moment for amphibians. A lot of them are being wiped out by things being moved around and, like funguses, horrible diseases causing huge problems in pond-like ecosystems. So do not use other pond or move anything from another pond we'll talk more about that when we get to like the colonization of your pond. So yeah, we've got we're also about to do exactly what I've said not to do, which is get something from the pond. But we are, after this video, we are going to put it straight back in the pond that's just there. So this is a sort of demonstration of what we do. So we've got the water, but also in the water, we've got some pond weed. So this is our oxygenator to keep oxygen in the water to stop it getting stagnant and to give the things living in it something to breathe. Like us, they need oxygen. So we've got this pondweed, which I've kept in the water, because if it's in the water, any little critters that are living on it can be kept alive. But if you get this, don't just go and take it from another pond. Do take it, get it from a reputable source. I don't know if we can see any, there were critters on it when I was fishing it out.
They might have all gone into the water now that they've been moved.
So yeah, pop that in. They come with sort of lead weights and things sort of to weigh them down, or you get special pots that will make it in the right place. And then we just gently fill this with water. I'd probably even put like a little layer of gravel across the bottom.
Some sort of substrate, yeah.
And here you can see what I mean about it demonstrating that it's not actually that level, almost like I was doing really quick.
Yeah, we've done this in 5 minutes. Obviously, you can take more time and care when you're doing it for your own garden.
So yeah, that's that one. And there's other ponds you can get. This is another demonstration of things. So this is duckweed, which is a sort of invasive weed that you may see floating. So it floats on the surface, and you'll have seen in spring, you may have seen this in ponds where there's a massive, just a complete solid block of green on the surface of a pond, and that's usually duckweed. And yeah, it's an invasive pest plant, and that blocks out all of the light to get into the water, and that means that these oxygenated plants can't get any water. So it's a good reason to get your pondweed from a reputable source, so like a garden centre or something like that, because they should protect you from things like that. Because what you don't want to be doing is spreading that immediately into your pond. It's very hard to get rid of.
It'll make your pond anaerobic, rather than aerobic, and anaerobic is when things will respire without oxygen, and it will kill everything.
It's also when stagnant water's really smelly, like really, really smelly.
Yeah,
that's because there's anaerobic respiration going on. So same with your compost if you're not putting enough air in it. Generally, when things smell fetid, I guess fetid is the word that comes to mind.
Like a Trump.
Yeah, just really gross. That's usually because anaerobic respiration's happening. So that's why you want to make sure that the oxygen's happening, and it just keeps it alive. It keeps it as a sort of mobile ecosystem, sort of moving in a circle rather than sort of just getting grosser and grosser. So yeah, so this is a very loose one. We've kind of moved this one slightly further along.
The water is settling now as well.
Yeah, so we've got our oxygenator plants in it, we've got our ramps coming in and out of it. We can still see sort of the blue edges of you can still see that this is a plastic storage box, can't you? So this is the time that you can sort of get more of the little rocks. So we've got some nice bark here. Just sort of work your way around and get it looking. If you're using bark, this won't last forever, so do be prepared to maintain this. We've got some nice volcanic rock here that we've got. You can sort of put that in the gaps, and that sort of infills around the edges. We've got some sedum here, which actually from building living roots. So this is something that thrives in quite dry environments. You can get stuff like that and sort of get it growing in the edges. You can get lots of different plants. Ferns and things are quite nice around a pond. You get sort of marsh marigolds and stuff. There's loads of really nice plants that you can plant in the marginal areas of the pond. Also things like lilies and stuff go in the water. You're not going to get too many plants in this because it's a tiny, tiny storage box. You do
want your tiny pond to be full of plants, but you want to leave at least, I'd say, 5 to 10% of it as open, just so it's accessible for those things coming to drink.
Infill the gaps. Need to remember not to make this too permanent because we do need to tidy up after ourselves.
I don't know, it's looking quite nice, to be honest.
I know, I'm pretty proud of this for like a 5-minute jobbing with a storage box.
That back border's looking really quite
elegant.
nice. Yeah.
So yeah, you can just take the time to sort of overlap it, get things sort of. This is somewhere where the black pond lot. If you use the sort of compost bag that's got like a black inside, if you put that pointing upwards, it's a bit easier to hide. You can mound soil up, and bury it a little, put stones over the edge, and just sort of make it appear gradual and hide the edges. Putting the bark on, things can get out. Yeah, it is looking all right, isn't it?
Shall we go back to the main stage and do a rundown of what to do and what not to do?
Yeah.
Once you've got it.
I did. Oh, that was the thing that I was going to quickly say. And I knew there was something I was about to say. The marginal plants. We were saying we've now got sort of 2 ponds right next to each other, which actually might be quite a nice thing to do. Because you get like, in bigger ponds, you kind of get the deep bit and then the shallower bit. And you can kind of recreate that with the mini ponds. Saying one thing you can do, I'll show you with the bucket as an example, is you could drill holes around the edge or make little holes around the edge. Be careful if you're sort of knocking them through because sometimes plastic can be quite brittle. They do just want to be little holes. And what you can do then is you can sort of fill the bottom bit up with gravel and stuff. And then you can, above the holes, have soil, and then you can plant things that like marginal species that like it to be boggy and they like it to be damp, but they don't want to be completely submerged. So you could then have that thing with the marginal species, so you can get your sort of the marsh marigolds and things like the nice, pretty flowers around the edge, and you could plant them up in it. So you could have a sequence of mini ponds that could provide different habitats. Because one thing with the washing up bowl and the storage box, it's quite difficult to make those gradient levels. So just by having a couple of things next to each other, maybe not a bucket, but you could bury this in even. So you could bury it so it's a similar height, and you could have like a little mosaic of different habitats in quite a small area using those. So that was just a way of varying up the habitat. Because the more variety you have in habitat, the more variety in animals you can get, and also more they can move from one to the other. We should say, we didn't actually say that at the very beginning, is we do have Hazel as tech support, who's the person that's sharing links and things in the comments. If you do have any questions, do ask them in the comments, and either we'll answer or Hazel will answer. And if you're not watching this live, because this will be online, this will be on YouTube, and it will be on our Facebook pages, so if you watch this and thought, ooh, I must show this to so-and-so, you can share them the link, and this video will still be there.
Which of course you will.
Everybody's going, oh, wasn't that great? I'll share this with everybody I know. This is still online, and you can watch it back. And we will still be checking the social media accounts. So if you do have any questions, do pop them in the comments, even if you're not watching it back live, and we will try and answer them. We might not do it immediately, but we'll try and do it in a few days. Yeah, so, yeah, now we've got that out of the way.
So we have our wildlife. There are a few other things that you need to have in mind once you have it. So it's got to the stage where the pond itself is now over brimming with
so much wildlife. So much wildlife.
Yeah, and it's getting a bit too overcrowded, or it needs maintenance. The best time of year to do that is
it's winter. So that's when everything's sleeping. But it's autumn, so at the end of autumn when everything's dying back. So you'll see maybe we should go and have a quick look at this pond. Should we walk up to that pond, I think, because we can kind of show what we've done.
Yeah. All right.
Well, so this is not a mini wildlife pond. This is our big wildlife pond at Hollybush.
1 second, apologies.
So at the end of summer, the vegetation, we can show you a few more of the plants that we've got as well.
Speak quite loud when you've got your back to the cart here.
I will. Trying to build it right now, so not quite sure as it would be. So we've got lots of breeds, we've got different plants around the edges, we've got moss and stone, but you can see it's all died back. Oh, there's a duck. Hello, Mrs. Duck. you eating all our frog spawn? Yes, you are.
It's
They like
very
to eat our frog
pixelated.
spawn. The circle of wildlife. All of this vegetation dies back, and so it's all gone brown. When it goes, and we have actually already cleared this quite a lot. As it starts to go brown and it dies back, it leaches all of the nutrients in it back into the pond, and you don't want that to happen. That can sort of over nitrogenify the water. It's not quite eutrophication, but like it builds up too much nutrients in the water, and that too much nutrients can make it stagnant. It can lead to something called algal bloom, which is where underwater plants just sort of take over, and they do a similar thing with just blocking out the light, stopping all the oxygenated plants from getting the light, and that can again lead to stagnant, the anaerobic respiration, the smelliness. So at the end of summer, autumn, when everything's dying back like this, you want to just take out any any brown vegetation. You don't want to pull it out because the roots will still be living. So that's why there is still some that's poking out. What we've done is we've just gone around and we've chopped it all off. In upon this side, you need to put waders on. What? Hello, missus. In upon this side, we put waders on, which are sort of waterproof trousers. They're very, very flattering. You want a pond just so you get to wear them. But in a smaller pond, you can easily do this from the edge. You might want to make sure you're wearing wellies. So that's what you want to do is put your foot in. But,
what do you do with the plants once you've taken them out?
Just chop the tops off and pull out any excess vegetation. If it's getting completely swamped with some vegetation, you can pull stuff out. But yeah, before you take it to your compost heap, it's really, really important that you make a pile of it near the pond, and you put that just next to the pond, because it's been locked down and we've been only doing essential maintenance, and we've been coming into Hollybush for doing that just to like keep things safe, keep things working, but we've not been doing as much tidying up as we normally would do because that's not felt essential during plague times. For anyone watching this back in a year's time being like, oh yeah, plague times. It's COVID times. So make a pile of it next to the pond. And what that means is all of the little waterborne critters that need the water to survive or can't travel very far, because as we said, they're quite small, they're quite isolated habitats. All of the things in there can make their way back to the pond, so that wiggle, 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 wiggle. They tend to go downhill, and they'll get back into the pond. So you won't be taking all your wildlife out, drying it out in your compost heap, not giving it a chance to survive. So all of the dragonfly nymphs, all of the water
hog lice,
baby newts, even tadpoles will probably be able to wiggle their way back. Do try and help things like that back if they are fully aquatic. They can all make their way back, and then in a week or two's time, you can then take this and you can put it in your compost heap, and it's great for compost. If you don't have a compost heap, if you do have sort of natural waste, garden waste stuff through your
brown bin
in Leeds, different colour bins in other places. I think they are brown bins, don't they? But yeah, you get compost bins through some councils. I don't have one in my house, but if you don't have that, you might just have to get rid of it in an old bin. But try and avoid that. Try and compost it if you can. And yeah, so that's that bit of maintenance.
Another bit that's really, really important, especially for tiny little baby frogs, is we have pretend we've got a meadow right next to
this will be a meadow, so the wildflower meadow is starting to come up.
Mm-hmm.
We've also got ground ivy here. We've got habitat tiles. Hedgehog Houses. We've got these little piles of logs. So yeah, as the baby frogs leave.
So as they leave, they need shelter. They need somewhere to sort of hop into. They don't want to be out on a path because other things can pick them up and gobble them up, which is unfortunate. And another thing, if you've got a grassy garden and your pond is in a grassy garden and you're noticing your grass is getting a little long, don't cut the grass around the pond area. And if you are going to cut the grass anywhere in the garden, go around with a stick first and just disturb the grass to make sure there's no frogs or anything, because otherwise it would be, yeah, you'd probably end up with quite a nasty little
They
surprise.
say to try and do sort of no mow May, don't they? That's quite a big sort of social media campaign. And one of the reasons for that is to give sort of animals sort of the chance to migrate through the slightly long grass during that 1 month. So yeah. And yeah, giving habitat, because people quite often go, oh, I found a frog. I'll put it back in the pond. Frogs and newts especially spend not very much of it. Like frogs do hibernate in the pond. Newts hibernate outside. You find them under logs and things. You find them under rocks. I think in our live streams on Mini Beach,
Yeah.
newts are the sort of thing you find.
If they want to be in a pond, they're usually in a pond.
They're amphibians. They live in and out of the water. So they do spend a lot of their lifespan outside the water. So don't be being like, I'll find the nearest pond, because they're also quite selective of the ponds they use. They tend to use ponds that they're familiar with, return to spawning ponds year on year. They have migratory routes that they take, and if you move them from that, you'll confuse them, and you're more likely to make them just not survive. So yeah, just leave them be and they'll find their way. But just if you provide ground cover and things in your garden, that provides ways for them to get to and from your pond. But Alex, I've made my wildlife pond. Where can I get some frog spawn?
Oh, I don't know. I've heard there's some ponds down by the canal that's got frog spawn in. Should I get it from there?
No, not the people. No. So yeah, like you see lots of people going to, you can actually get frog spawn in. Now you get ponds, nature reserve. People are like, oh great, they've got loads of frogs, I'll go get some. Don't. Please don't. It's one of the worst things you can do for spreading disease is going and getting amphibian spawn from one place and taking it to another. If you've made a habitat pond that's suitable for the habitat, for the wildlife that you want, it will come over time, and that might not happen immediately. That might take quite a long time. You might never get frogs, especially if you've got to wash up bowl on the balcony. Yeah, you're probably never going to get frogs in that. And if you do put frogs in that, they're not going to survive because they need to be able to roam. But you're more likely to get your sort of flying insect larvae, like your dragonflies, or probably more your damselflies and things in that. But don't be introducing amphibians to a pond. And I don't think you get wild cotton frogs from reputable dealers.
Oh, apologies.
Alex has got a text notification.
So yeah, I mean, if you go online, there's hundreds of sites for things like pond plants and other things. So you can find pretty much everything you'd want for a pond, apart from the little critters. But give it time, and I guarantee 100%, given a year, there will be something in the pond. It might be too small for you to necessarily see with the naked eye.
If
but
you look on the Skeleton Grange, the TCB Leeds YouTube. So if you go on YouTube, search TCB Leeds, then our YouTube channel. Some of you might already be watching it on that, but if you're watching through Facebook, do go on the YouTube. And there's actually a video from our Skeleton Grange pond, and someone's filmed microorganisms. It's such a good video. I went and looked at it. It's not got very many views, and I feel wronged.
Yeah, it's really cool.
But it's the microorganisms that you get living in a pond, and a gentleman comes and he's filmed them a few times and studied them at Skeleton Grange Pond down in South Leeds. And that just gives you an idea of what's living in your pond, even if you can't necessarily see it. So you might look at it and think, I've got nothing, but actually you may well do. If you put it under a microscope, you'll realise huge amounts of life.
You would be surprised. 1 centimetre of this pond contains thousands of things.
So you may not get the charismatic newts and things swimming around you want in a tiny pond. The smaller it is, the less likely you are to get things like that. But you are for the creative habitat. So it is worth, if you want something that is rewarding back to you, because it's your garden, you want it to look nice. That's normal. You want something that's pleasing to look at, that no one's going to go, what's that washing up bowl doing in front of the garden? Like, fill it with those nice plants, like the marshmallow girls and things. They are beautiful. So get those beautiful and a fern behind it. Like, get it looking pretty that way. And even if you don't have those charismatic bigger species in it, you'll still have something that's rewarding and worthwhile to look at. And still even if you get a little water feature, like, that's a a really lovely thing to have. Like the sound of water's really relaxing. It's kind of known. It's also happen to work with people or have lived somewhere with someone that's sort of got visual impairments. It's a really nice way that they use for helping people know their way around a garden and be able to know where you are in a garden. So it can give people quite a lot of autonomy and freedom to move around, because if you know that the water feature is over there, it can be really helpful to people in that way as well. So yeah, a water feature could be a nice, and that just adds the value to you, because you know it's your garden and we want to help wildlife, but you're allowed to be selfish in your garden. So yeah, think about those ways you can make it something, because we are not allowed you fish. We've banned you for having your fish. So there are other ways that you can make it this nice sort of ornamental thing that is really pleasing.
Yeah.
This one's very much a wildlife pond. Not everyone has. Most people do not have space for this. And you may not want something looking quite as wild as this, but we're a conservation centre. We want things to look a little bit wild. We want things to, be fully designated to wildlife. But if you want to find that balance for yourself, you could clear this more as well. It's quite big, and as I said, we've been at much reduced capacity, so we didn't necessarily do as neat a job as we might have done in normal maintenance time. But it's looking all right, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, have we had any more questions?
No, not live, but we'll, like you said, we will check back for probably the rest of the day. We'll keep checking, and Hazel is there as well, and she can answer. She's put a few links in the link dump, or in the comments. Sorry. Yeah, I'm gonna face it front now. So yeah, any questions? If to be honest, if you've got any questions about ponds, maybe give the other live streams a look, because we probably did answer them.
Yeah.
It's likely, and if not, then always shoot a question our way.
And do have a look at the videos just to see what light you can get in ponds. It is beautiful. It does make it feel good. Well, there's one. I think the second live stream we did on ponds, we caught a newt. So if you want to see a male smooth newt up close, we got it in a little pot, and it was amazing.
I think we talked about this newt.
I talked about it every live stream because I'm in love with that newt. Like, it was beautiful. It was just Alex was trying to keep him running the live stream. And I was just going, it's facing me. Anyway, I'm getting a bit emotional thinking about it.
So
yeah, thank you very much for joining us.
To wrap up,
we just really like ponds, just to how much they can benefit everything. Like, it's worth loving them, and it's worth falling in love with ponds just for what you can get from them.
It can bring a whole new sort of dimension to a garden or a green space.
And a lot of people are a bit scared of them. A lot of people are like, but what if something falls in? Say, a mini pond is not going to do any harm. If you locate it properly, it's not going to come. Nothing's going to. And you've got the ramps going out of it. Like, it's safe. You can always put a little fence around it, and that will make it even safer if you're worried. But yeah, fall in love with the pond. If you've got any concerns about issues you think you might have with them, do get in touch, and we might be able to answer, because we put a lot of ponds in schools and things, and we work with a lot of small children in pondy areas. So if you do want advice on how to make it safe in an environment used by people that you're worried about falling in it, basically, do get in contact, and we might be able to offer you some advice on how to make it, to overcome those barriers. So
we'll be back same place, same time next week. So Wednesday at 11 on this YouTube channel if you're watching on YouTube, and this Facebook page if you're watching on Facebook.
Yeah, and next week we will be doing how to build a hedgehog house. So we've got Tom, who did the bird box one a few weeks ago. He's going to be coming back, and he's going to be helping talk us through how to make your own hedgehog box and habitat box. So, and we'll be making it out of a kit, which you might be able to get the kit from us, or you can quite easily make the kit yourself and out of wood. So we'll just be talking through why you might want to build a hedgehog home, how to make a hedgehog home beautiful, how to put it next to your pond so it can go and drink in your mid pond. You'll have